signs. They were all around because of trying to deal largely with FEMA and flood insurance issues. And in fact, okay. So I was just reminded that we have our microphone working again in the middle. So when you have questions for George, you can use them. So we brought George here today because I don't know whether most of you know that the flood insurance program is under a lot of discussion at Congress, but unfortunately, as I think he'll explain, it's under discussion under wraps, and we're extremely concerned about what the consequences of that might be. He is probably the penultimate expert in flood insurance and recovery from storms. StopFemaNow, which is his organization, has, how many members do you have across the country now?
It's well over 50,000 across the country.
So 50,000, but guess where it all started? Right here in Toms River in Ortley Beach. So George has done a tremendous effort. He's been to Washington on many, many trips, continues to go there, works with all the necessary congressmen on both sides of the aisle. And the primary purpose of his organization is to make sure that our properties stay affordable with regard to flood insurance. So George, he is an absolute trooper fighting for you. So he's going to spend about 15 minutes talking about what's going on with flood insurance. He asked for permission to post this live on Facebook, so just know that that's going on. And I'll turn it over to George. And then there'll be some time for questions at the end, right? Or do we take them in the middle?
Whatever you want. I don't know how long I have.
I think it's better at the end.
Okay, so I'm talking for 15 and then they can ask questions.
Correct.
So give me like 3 minutes before we're done and we'll go. Number one is I want to thank, my name is George Casimos. I live in Toms River. I was flooded during Superstorm Sandy. I believe government's inefficient, but what's happened since Superstorm Sandy and continues to happen to this day is a travesty. Specifically with rebuilding after Superstorm Sandy, and more specifically today about the exorbitant rise in flood insurance premiums. So I live on the mainland. You can drive the jet ski or your boat across. I live in Snug Harbor in Toms River. I want to thank some folks here before. Number one is Ortley Beach Voters Taxpayers Association is more than just a local civic group. They are the reason the state of New Jersey has a dune system, and please give everybody here a round of applause. The reason the dunes are here is because these folks and what you guys did. The $1 billion dune system was proposed in the 1980s, and it got built years after Sandy. That's how long it takes these things to happen, okay, just so you know. So I just want to say Anthony Colucci, Paul Jeffrey, Kathy Brasciano, Marianne Wallace, John Cantalupo, Kathy Crescifulo, Joan Stathern, and I might have forgot one or two, but everybody specifically on the board, but everybody in OBVTA, and I'm sorry, I might have forgot somebody, but everybody, you guys were great. Number one. Number two is the first meeting we ever had, I was looking for information on how to rebuild my home. And I remember, and George Wittmann, raise your hand, George. George Wittmann was the council president, didn't know anybody. He came to my house and he said, what's going on? Because he didn't have answers, okay? Mo Hill was at the first meeting. Mo Hill, raise your hand. Mo was at the first meeting of StopFemaNow so we can get answers. The township engineer there, so we can kind of just start gathering information so we can build our homes correctly. I also want to thank Councilwoman Maria Maruca for coming. This is very important. New Jersey had $4.3 billion in lost rateables. $4.3 billion in lost rateables. It's okay.
That's okay.
$4.3 billion in lost rateables for the state of New Jersey. Toms River had over half, $2.4 billion in lost rateables. And our taxes did not go up, I mean, very nominal, okay, for all that. So I want to say you guys did a fantastic job in helping keeping our taxes low. All right. If anybody, now we're going to start talking about flood insurance. Teresa, raise your hand. If Teresa's got some paperwork there, we're going to start discussing flood insurance. On June 12th, the House Services Financial Committee unanimously passed legislation on a new flood insurance bill. Flood insurance has been not reauthorized. It's got to get reauthorized every 5 years. 10 times it's been kicked down the road, like a 2-month reauthorization. So your flood insurance is in a precarious position. Well, they passed the bill in the House, and here's what you're getting. Your primary homeowner, you're going to get up to 18% compounded yearly increases until you reach your actuary rate. Second homeowners, who's a second homeowner here? You're going to receive up to 25% compounded yearly increases until you reach your actuary rate. That's what's in Congress right now. That was in June 12th. Senator Menendez now announced a press release, a press conference with an opposing bill, and he wants to limit increases up to a maximum of 9% compounded yearly increases. So that's the bill that we want to kind of go. Even 9% compounded annually in about 8 years, your flood insurance will double. In the first bill, second homeowner, your flood insurance will double every 3 years. Your flood insurance will double every 3 years. So does everybody remember the V-zone problems that we had? The V-zone problems where we got remapped. Well, FEMA's coming out with something called Risk Rating 2.0. Senator Schumer had a press conference, and he said, properties, this is from Senator Schumer's office, properties situated closer to rivers, oceans, and bays will be considered higher risk and will be paying higher premiums. Senator Schumer and other elected officials are calling on the National Flood Insurance Program to halt a revamp on this, saying the change would increase premiums to affordable residents, pricing residents, and lowering property values. So let me just explain what risk mapping is, okay? The way they've been mapping was a mess. The Office of Attorney General and FEMA, they overlook all the bad stuff. They basically came out and said FEMA's maps, as they lay today, are over 40% wrong. I don't know how you can rate somebody if half your mapping is wrong, okay? So they're gonna come out with something called risk rating. And so I just made, this is us on Bay Avenue, this is the lagoons, this is the Barnegat Bay, this is the Atlantic Ocean. So generally speaking, you got your V-zone here, and they came out about 3 years ago with the Limois line. I remember George Wittmann and Mo calling me and saying, hey, you know, there's this new line here. And about 3 years ago, I don't know why they made a new line, but it only affected people when you were building your home. You had to build it to V-zone standards, okay? But it didn't cost you anything. Well, what Risk Mapping 2.0 is doing is they're saying, hey, let's say this line is the V-zone, okay? And these homes in the lagoon, some of these are in a V-zone. And at some point, the house next door is in an A-zone. And from here to about here is all A-zone. Well, what FEMA's saying is well, you know, the V-zone's right here. The house right next to the V-zone, or that block or two next to the V-zone, is really almost a V-zone. So what we're going to do is we're going to charge them, and I don't know the exact number, but the people right next to the V-zone are going to be paying V-zone less 10% rates. If you're in a V-zone and you're 2 feet below the if you're in a V-zone and you're 3 feet below the BFE, your flood insurance will be over $30,000 a year. This is no joke, okay? So that's what they're doing. They're going to spread the risk out. And that's the fundamental problem that we're going to have here.
George,
yes, sir.
ask if anybody's in the V-zone.
Is anybody in the V-zone? Okay, generally, how do you know? Yes. Okay. So who lives on the bay? Number one, I want to date you. Number two is, in most cases, yeah, usually, and look, there's no, this is the federal government doing this, so there's nothing clear. This is like the IRS. Nothing's clear. But if you're usually on the bay or on the well, not the ocean, but on the bay, that first couple houses are usually in a V-zone, okay? You already know you're in V-zone rates, and if you didn't elevate, you're probably going to have high premiums. Let me just take a step. Who's paying more than $1,000 a year in flood insurance? Raise your hand. Can you pan that for me? Ray, keep your hand up. I want everybody to keep your hand up. Are you paying more than $1,000 a year? All right, if you're paying more than $2,000 a year, keep your hand up. Keep your hand up. If you're paying more than $3,000 a year, keep your hand up. So nobody's paying more than $2,000 a year. Okay, that's good. Whose house is not elevated? Raise your hand. Okay, if your house is not elevated and it's not newer, like built in the since Sandy, you should be very concerned about what's happening. Okay, very, very concerned about what's happening. Because this is directly going to affect you. But even people who are elevated, who built after Sandy a brand new house in full compliance with the city of Toms River, and you're situated next to the V zone, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. Senator Schumer, Senator Menendez, Senator Cassidy from Louisiana, Senator Kennedy, we have a close relationship with our group. They've actually said, FEMA, tell us exactly how you're going to map and how it's going to affect people. And you know what they've gotten? No direct answer. It's 121 word on their website on what they're going to do. So there's nothing in there. They're very, very concerned, okay? On the second page, does everybody have this handout? If you don't have this handout, go out to Teresa. And Teresa, raise your hand. The second page. If you are not elevated, even if you are elevated, you should be concerned. But if you are not elevated, I'm going to take a step back. I had a meeting like this about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Gentleman comes in. He said, I'm from Green Island. I said, how can I help you? He said, I dropped my flood insurance right after Superstorm Sandy. He lives on the bay in Green Island. He was paying $3,800 a year. Please listen to this. He was paying $3,800 a year. And I said, okay. He said, I'm trying to sell my home. I dropped my flood insurance. I said, okay. So what's your problem? He said, I went to go get flood insurance, and my flood insurance came in at $32,000 a year on Green Island. Yes.
Can you define elevated? Is that within more than 1 foot above the base flood elevations?
Okay, so that, all right. So what's elevated? And I think Teresa said this. What does elevated mean? Elevate, it's the federal government, so I can't give you a broad spectrum. But bottom line is, the higher your home is in relation to FEMA's base flood elevation, the lower your flood insurance premium is. I'm going to give you my example. My home was, before Sandy, was 1 foot above FEMA's elevation. My home was at 7 foot, okay? Sandy came, they put it up to 8 foot, I had to go up to 9 foot. I only had to lift my house up 2 feet. So I had to go to elevation 9. I put it up to 15.5 because I read this stuff. I know what's coming down the road. So I'm up at 15.5. I pay, I think, my wife pays it, but I think it's like $300 a year. Does anybody pay $300 or less a year? How many steps to your house, to get into your house, sir, in the green?
15.
15. How many steps? I put an elevator in my house, I got bad knees. That's why I paid $300. So is anybody thinking about lifting their home? No one's, okay. If you lift your home, whether you lift it an inch or 10 feet, that first inch is what costs you most of the money. Go as high as you can, all right, number one. So let me go back to this gentleman. So this gentleman was paying $3,800, and if he had kept flood insurance, and he had kept it and didn't drop it and lapse and start. So here's the key. Don't let your flood insurance lapse. If your flood insurance lapse, you have to go to what he did. You're going to his actuarial rate. That is what he's going to be paying once the subsidies are gone. By the way, flood insurance has been subsidized. It's $25 billion in the red. Government's done. We're not subsidizing all the millionaires. You're all millionaires, by the way. You're the rich millionaires on the water. So the federal government is not going to subsidize flood policyholders at all. Okay? That gentleman didn't know that his actuarial rate was $32,000 a year. So let me take a step back. You have friends that are coming to buy. Anybody thinking about selling their house, maybe going to Florida, maybe selling 4 or 5 years and going to Florida and finishing up in Florida? In 5 years, your flood insurance might be $10,000 or $15,000. Ain't nobody gonna buy your house with a $15,000 flood insurance premium. So you need to know what your actuarial rate is. That gentleman on Green Island, he didn't know his actuarial rate was $32,000 a year. If you had bought that house and he had flood insurance, you were buying a house with a $32,000 flood insurance problem. Very important. A lot of people, this is going to be the next issue, all right? Yes. Yep. Oh, okay, what you can do to help. Number one is on the second page, we have a bunch of websites, Facebook pages, my email address if you have any questions, and call your congressman and your senators. A lot of you guys live up north, call your congressman and say, I want the Menendez bill. I want the cheapest flood insurance increases allowable, okay? This is gonna be a big fight. In this other bill, we're finishing up in 2 minutes. In this other bill, ICC, if anybody's lifting their home, it's going from $30,000 to $60,000. So you're gonna get another $30,000 to help lift your home. That's it. Questions?
Please use the microphone.
George, how do we determine where the base flood elevation is or starts?
That's a great question. So you can go to a website. It's called What Is My ABFE? Apple, Baker, Frank, Edward. ABFE. What is my AB? Just Google what is my ABFE. Type in your address and it'll tell you what FEMA's preliminary flood map. We're going by the preliminary flood map. By the way, I was talking to Mo Hill. By the way, Mo Hill is a rear admiral. I'm a big fan of Mo. Stand up, Mo, for a second. He's a rear admiral, but also we've been talking about flood. He's very interested in flood, and the big issue is when are the maps coming out?
Right.
We're still waiting for maps. I'll tell you from Katrina, it took 12 years to get their maps. 12 years after Katrina, we're 7 years out. But New York City's doing a map appeal. They're starting from scratch again, and now you got risk mapping 2.0. Our kids might see new maps. That's when I think we're gonna get new maps. I don't know, but it's gonna be a long time. Yes?
Yeah, we were told that once we had our dune system in and all of that, that then they would remap our town.
Yes.
Is that not gonna happen, you think?
So I don't know. I'm gonna let Mo answer that question. I don't even know if Mo knows.
I don't know, but George and I attended a meeting up in Long Branch, and that was one of the questions I asked, is when are the new maps coming out? As you know, New York City filed an action saying that the maps were too high. And I believe it was, in New York, it was like 2 feet too high. And if you came down the Jersey Shore, it gradually came down. In our area, it was 1 foot to 1.5 feet. So it makes a difference. I live on Green Island where George lives. My mother's house was built back in the 50s. They bought it in '63. My mother lived there 50 years. She passed away in June before the storm, so now it's a second home. Never had a flood problem. 62, no flood. 92, no flood. Sandy, 1.5 feet of water in her house. She was up on a 30-inch crawl space. There was no money for elevation for my brother for the house, so we repaired the house. I'm one of the people that dropped my flood insurance because it went up to $1,200. The house is small. My situation is different in that whoever buys that property would probably tear the house down. So but the only value I have now is the property, not the house. And again, when we were at this meeting, we asked the question about flood maps and when they were going to change them or correct them, because you're right, we were told not only was the mapping going to come down, but the dune was going to reduce it further.
Absolutely.
And the Army Corps of Engineers has told us that if the dune was in place, none of this would have happened. There wouldn't have been a breach in Manalocan, you wouldn't have the Back Bay flooding.
So
Bingo.
Mo, can Tom's River do anything to appeal to them to say, you know, we were told that it would, we're not talking about your overall maps. We're talking about us because of this dune system that came in. Can Tom's
this-
River appeal to it?
Yeah, the question was, can Tom's River appeal to the FEMA maps? I think this is a broad-based problem, so the whole, both New York City and New Jersey are gonna be appealing because of the damage. One of my questions to George is, we have flooding issues on the coast. What happens in the tornado areas? Are their rates going up, or are they gonna stay the same?
So, it's a great question, Mo. Tornado areas. Number one, most people don't have tornado insurance. If you have a flood, you have flood insurance. If they have a tornado or wildfire or earthquake, most people don't have that disaster insurance. So we almost get penalized by insuring ourselves. It's really a shame. By the way, Mo, correct me if I'm wrong, because flood insurance is so high on your home on Green Island, you paid it off cash and you
I don't have a mortgage, so I elected not to carry it.
He elected not to carry flood insurance because it's too high. That's what's going to happen. People are going to break their 401ks, pay it off, because I can make more money on self-insuring than actually going through the unaffordable FEMA program. The meeting that Mo and I attended, what it was with Congressman Pallone and mayors and councilmen from Ocean and Monmouth County. They're proposing to be building sea gates on Barnegat Inlet, Manasquan Inlet, and Little Egg, the three inlets in Barnegat Bay. So in reality, we're going to be in a bathtub. If a big storm comes, we got dunes, we're going to close everything in, we're good to go. They did this in New Orleans. After Katrina in New Orleans, they raised the levees like 3 feet. Now they live in a bathtub. If you've ever been to New Orleans, you're here